Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our customer panel offering insights into Xpitax tax outsourcing. First and foremost, we hope that you and your loved ones are happy, healthy, and staying safe. During today's webinar, you'll hear firsthand from your peers as they share their experiences utilizing Xpitax tax outsourcing. Throughout the webinar, you will have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions during the Q&A portion of the webinar. If we don't get to your questions during today's webinar, our team will be sure to follow up afterwards. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Drew Thomason.
Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate you introducing everybody and getting this webinar kicked off for us. Everybody, welcome. We're so glad you're here today. We're going to kind of go through a quick agenda to kick off, kind of tell you about why we're here, what we're going to be covering, and then we'll kind of jump into material and get to the information that you guys are all here to hear about. So the first thing we're going to be covering today is tax season successes, talk about Xpitax, our offshore capabilities, the successes we had this year, just the tremendous amount of successes we had this year, and kind of go through some of the progress we've made over the last couple years in growing that portion of our business. We're going to give you a little introduction to Xpitax tax outsourcing in general. So we have a director from that division that's going to talk a little bit about kind of the hows and the whys and the what's behind it. We furthermore are going to hear from the panel, right, which is why you all are here, to hear from clients that use this service of ours, talk about their ups, their downs, their pitfalls, their successes, and really give you some best practices and tips and tricks on how to implement this service within your organization. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So that you guys can ask questions directly to these folks and really get the information that you need to hear about. And then we'll close out. So a quick hour. So with that, Alyssa, let's get to the next slide and kind of get started. So my name again is Drew Thomason. I am the Central Division Manager here for Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting North America. We're going to kind of go through the panel left to right and allow these individuals to introduce themselves to you. Tell you about what they do, why they're here to speak with you. So with that, Ray, why don't you come off mute and introduce yourself to the rest of the organization for us?
All right, thanks, Drew. Hello, everyone. My name is Ray Barlow. I am the Director of Outsource Operations here at WK. My responsibility is for all of the outsource business within this company. So the tax outsourcing and other parts of our business, both domestic and international. I've been doing this for a number of years, so glad to be here and glad to talk to everyone. Marie?
Thanks, Ray. Marie?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Marie Kelly here, and I'm a field sales manager, and I look after a team of sales consultants supporting our clients in the Northeast. And thank you again to our panelists for participating in this session, and thanks to all of you that have attended. That'll hand it over to you, Nick.
Okay,
Nick,
am I unmuted now?
You are.
Okay, great. My name is Nick Papakarikos. I'm a CPA in Boston. We have a total of 8 people working for us. We began using Xpitax during our extension season last year and just did our first full year.
Awesome, thank you, Nicholas. And Carla?
My name is Carla Daniel with Blackman and Sloop CPAs. I'm a principal of the firm on the tax side and the IT partner. And we've actually been using Xpitax. This was our 5th tax season, and it's worked very well for us.
Awesome, thank you for that, Carla. All right, guys, so we're going to talk a little bit about tax season successes and kind of what we've put out, just the quality of product that we've put out this year. With our Xpitax. So Alyssa, thank you for advancing all of those. We're going to kind of start in the upper left and go clockwise around. So we have seen a 10% increase in the number of CCH access firms just in general with Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting North America. This just means that more and more people are moving to the cloud every day, and we're seeing this number just increase year over year. The technology that the cloud puts out for us and the advancements that it puts out for us ultimately have just become a massive factor within the industry these days. You know, when we talk about retaining talent and attracting talent, moving towards the cloud is absolutely one of those thing that's necessary. It is not a nice to have, it is a need to have these days. And so as a result, we're seeing more and more firms ultimately move towards the cloud. The next thing we want to talk about is how many more forms were actually introduced this year. So we had a total of 205 forms added to our library, which brings us up to roughly about 5,250 on the amount of forms that we have within our tax platform, both Pro Systems, which is our legacy product, and then our Access Tax platform. 94% of accounting today's top 100 accounting firms use CCH Access. Guys, 94 of 100 of the top 100 firms use Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting CCH Access as their platform to get through the season. Fantastic numbers there. When you look at accounting today's top 25 fastest growing accounting firms, 80% of the top 25 fastest growing firms use Access Tax. If that doesn't say something, I don't know what else will. Second and last piece, the 41% increase in Xpitax returns this year. So we have an accuracy of 99%, right? We are seeing a massive growth in our Xpitax business. When we acquired XCM a few years ago, we were doing about 20,000 tax returns. We expect to do 100,000 tax returns this year in our Xpitax business alone. So massive growth there, sell out every year. So the urgency is definitely there to take a look at it. And that's why you guys are here today. We've also seen when we look at our support times just overall for Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting North America, we've seen a 73% decrease in wait times for phone support and an 89% decrease for chat support, which means that if issues are arising, we're getting to our customers faster than ever to get their problems resolved, to make sure that they can go about doing their business during the heat of the moment when April is floating around. Next slide, Melissa. So I'm going to turn it over to Ray Barlow, our Director of Xpitax Tax Outsourcing, to talk to us a little bit about what the product is, how it works, kind of give us a brief overview of that before we kind of get into the panel discussion. So Ray, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and chatting with us a little bit.
All right, thanks, Drew. And we're just going to go quick for those who may not be familiar with what we do at Xpitax. Just a quick overview. This will only take a few minutes, but we did start way back in 2002. Providing tax outsourcing, one of the first to do that. Over the course of the last 20 years, we've done over 400,000 tax returns. The average return completion has been under 48 hours. We typically have returns back to customers within 24 to 48 hours. And last year, our accuracy on offshore was at 99.5%. We typically do an audit every year to look at all of any of the mistakes that we made and rate them in terms of whether they're impactful to the tax return or not. And so we're at 99.5, actually 99.7% of the accuracy on firms that were not impactful to the tax return. So maybe a couple of typo errors here and there. So we do that every year to look at our quality. Next slide. So our business, we have a tech-enabled tax outsourcing. We're 100% automated, RPA driven. We use bots to help drive this process. We can, for our offshore business, all types of returns, from the simplest returns to the most complex. All of our staff are basically in the accountancy program within the program in India. So they've either completed it or they're matriculating through the accountancy program. And we do have offshore, onshore options. Our onshore options are limited to just 1040 work, whereas our offshore can do all types of returns. We do some data conversions as well. And then we are looking at a fully automated scan, validate, and populate solution. No human intervention, completely software application, leveraging what I would call AI and robotics, RPA. So that's coming sometime by the end of this year. Next slide. So one of the things we always get questioned on is, what about the data? What happens to the data? Right now, and this will never change, the data that you send to us, all the source documents, any copies of prior year tax returns, none of that data actually leaves the United States. It's housed in our, currently it's housed in our data center in Waltham, Massachusetts. And what we will VPN into that data center to perform the tax work. So we don't pull anything down, we don't download any documents, we don't print documents. All of the information is housed in our data center in Waltham. So basically you upload to the data center and we come in and grab the information we need and we put it into what I would call well, not dumb terminals, but laptops that have no capability of downloading documents. And then we perform the work on the return. It's put right back into the system and then sent back to the firm. Next slide. Over the course of the years, we've always done a pretty good job of getting customer information, customer feedback. One of the things that we're very proud of is our ability to accommodate firms who maybe something happens during tax season, they lose key people, and now rather than maybe they signed up to do a couple of hundred returns with us, but now they need to do more. And oftentimes they come to us and say, hey, we just lost a couple of key people. Can you guys do more returns for us? And in almost every instance, the answer has been yes. So over the years, we've seen a growth in our outsourced business. Like Drew said, we're expecting to budget somewhere around 100,000 returns for the full year. About 65 to 70% of those will be during tax season. Next slide. All right, so I am going to turn this over to Marie to take it from here for the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. All right, so again, thank you, Carla and Nick, for joining us this afternoon. Carla, I'd love to start with you, and we'd love to hear your insights on what prompted you to consider outsourcing to begin with.
Well, like most firms these days, staffing for one, and also compression of the timing to get the work completed and provide good service to our clients. And we have a firm of about 45 people, not all tax, but you want to be able to service the clients and do a good job so that they'll keep coming back.
Wonderful. And do you feel like you gain those benefits from implementing the service?
We definitely have. What we started out, like many of you, we weren't sure about using Xpitax, and we did a little test drive. And the first year we did 100 returns, and before tax season was over, we went back and said, "Hey, can you help us do maybe 25 more?" Just because they did such a good job, and the turnaround time is so quick, 24 to 48 hours, like they said. So it's really helpful.
That's wonderful, and we're so glad to hear that. So how would you say that this has changed your overall client relationships, and did it address your capacity and compression concerns? And
well, yes, we're able to get deliver more returns quicker, provide more service to the client, and it certainly allows our staff to do some higher level work. Maybe they're not doing any data entry. That gives them a greater chance to younger staff to maybe review returns and also have more communication with the clients.
That's great. That's wonderful. Nick, how about you? What prompted you to consider outsourcing initially?
Well, similar to Carla, the staffing question is always difficult, and we just found it difficult to have consistency across all of our team. So when it came time to review returns, in some cases the reviews would be very easy to do and the work was high quality. Others not as much and required more review time. Mm-hmm. So the ability to have staff and to, I spoke to a colleague of mine before we started this program who was using it. And the phrase that he used to me that really sold me was, when I asked him about the quality of the work, if I quote him correctly, it was something along the lines of, the quality is better than everybody other than our top staff, meaning they're really good. And that's exactly what we found. And we get back work papers that are so easy to follow. There's been 2 sets of eyeballs reviewing them. All the documents that we scan over there come back with tick marks on them. I mean, it is such a consistent, first of all, and high quality sort of work papers that the review time is so short. it's been wonderful, and they turn them around in most cases overnight, given the time zone differences, I would believe. So we just needed the staffing, and then like Carla said, it allowed us to take people who are working on business clients, to keep them working on business clients, and that seasonal workload that might have a lot of individual tax gets to be outsourced for the data entry, and then we review it.
That's so great. And I'm so glad to hear that the quality was, it sounds like almost better than you were even expecting.
It was.
How did you decide, or maybe the better way to say this is, how did you manage, what returns you decided to send to CCH and to Xpitax?
That's interesting. A lot of it was driven by the clients who signed the disclosure form, first of all, but that was a significant amount of them. So when work came in, the first question was, did we receive the disclosure form back? If we did, then in most cases, we would send it off unless it was associated with the business return. And in those cases, we may or may not do that. But what we found over the course of tax season is we probably overestimated the number of returns that we were going to do. But since the billing process, as I understand it, also functions on numbers of pages of the documents more than anything else, we decided to send off a lot of the nuisance returns, like children's returns and things like that, that were only 4 or 5 pages. And it was a great way to get those done also and get them off the plate and not have to have other, capable staff play around with them. So, but we would send, we had no limit on how complex it could be, because we sent some pretty complex returns over there last summer when we tried it out, and they came back in great condition. So it was more or less who allowed us to do it. And from that point on, the default was it's going to go to Xpitax, and if it's not going to go to Xpitax, it's probably because we didn't get the disclosure form.
Right. And that's a question that we get quite often, and it would be great to have your perspective on that. A lot of our clients are concerned about how many of those forms they'll get, or what's the process for managing, sending out those disclosure forms. How did that work for you? And do you have any suggestions or thoughts on best practices there?
Yeah, we had never really been a big DocuSign firm, and we weren't really using, we use Thomson Reuters UltraTax software, and they have an e-signature program that we never really used. So a lot of what we sent out was email documents and asked the clients to sign and send them back. So we knew early on that if we were going to get this system back, what other firms had done was use DocuSign or something similar to that to send to clients. And so we put together the disclosure, the engagement letter, put the IRS disclosure form in there, and set it up so that it's ready to be signed. And we sent it out to everybody. I think we sent it out as early as the first week of January, if not sooner, and followed up. And just like people told me before we started this program, very few people ever even asked about it. They just signed it and sent it in. And for the few who did, we drafted a pretty simple email as sort of the initial response, which says a lot of the things that you mentioned, that that the data is stored on the server in Waltham, Massachusetts. Many times, if we did get a question, it was, are you outsourcing my returns? I like working with you. And I just said to them, we're not outsourcing the preparation of your return, we're outsourcing the data entry, which is a distinction, but it's true. I just say to them that the data is put in by somebody, whether it's somebody in my office or somebody at Xpitax, but the same people are reviewing the returns. And that seemed, I think maybe 1 or 2 people out of all the people we talked to decided they didn't want to do it. And in most cases, it was because they were. And we gave them the option of not using it and doing it in-house, which is what they chose. But very few people were reluctant. And I was surprised how many people readily accepted the concept because they see it in so many other aspects of their day-to-day lives.
That's great. That's great feedback. Carla, what about you? How did you decide, and how do you decide? I know you've had some evolution over the years and how you've used this service. Can you talk to us about those decisions and how you manage the process around that?
Yes, like Nicholas, what we also do is we put that along with our engagement letter. Initially, we were concerned that clients wouldn't sign it, but in today's world, everything is happening globally, and we only have a little bit of pushback from just a few people now. Even initially, we really didn't get that much pushback. But we do typically, we get an engagement letter every year, and we'll send out that disclosure as well, just so that they can have it and they can see it and they can sign it and put that in our files. But just to be transparent with our clients, but we're not getting much pushback on that now. It's just part of doing business. And it's just a regulatory thing that's required by us. And most clients seem to be fine with it.
That's great. And how do you decide what returns you're going to send to Xpitax?
So initially we thought, oh, well, we're testing them and we would send the simple ones. But what we've learned is the more complex returns are even better to send, because you don't have a staff person spending 10 hours on a return, and you're only charged from Xpitax for the number of pages you send them. So it could be not very many pages, and you don't get charged very much, and you've freed up 10 hours of staff time. So we send just about anybody that signs that disclosure, we send that return to Xpitax. I mean, not everyone, but a large majority, and we're lucky that the more difficult returns seem to come in close to extension time, or they're extended returns, and it's a great way to send that information. And you might be missing one or two pieces for those extensions, but at least the data is already in there, and it helps you with those extension amounts. So it's very helpful.
That's great. Are there any returns that you don't send to Xpitax for any reason?
Not really. Sometimes, on the other hand, we may not send a child's return that has, one little statement that needs to go, and we'll have an intern do those returns for us. But we don't really limit it to the complexity of the return. The more complex, probably the better that we send.
That's great. That's wonderful feedback. I know a lot of clients are concerned about what types of returns should they send, and should they send the more simple returns or the more complex. So that's great feedback. It sounds like you both had good experience with all types of returns. Are there any lessons, Nicholas, we'll come back to you. Is there any lessons that you would say you learned, or things that you would do different after your first year using the service? What would you change about the way that you used it, or what do you wish you had known before you took this on?
I still need a better understanding of the number of returns, because, as I said, you price them based on a range of returns. That's how the price per page changes. And as I said, I think we probably took a higher range than we needed, because as we worked through the process, we found there were fewer returns. But when you take into account the page count, however you guys track that, we were picking up the difference that way. So I think I'd probably say estimate lower for numbers of returns if you're not sure. But beyond that, you just need to have some good administrative people, because it really hinges on people scanning the documents, sending it back and forth and downloading it, restoring the files to your tax software. But I would tell you, it isn't as challenging as it might think. You just have to realize, as Carla said, you're being charged by the page. So we have, like many people, 1099 forms from brokerage firms that might have hundreds of pages in them, most of which are just individual trades, transactions, which aren't going to be posted to the return. So we find that for most 1099 forms for each account, it's really the first 3 pages, and on occasion a page in the back for municipal interest, that has to be scanned. So once you train your folks to know what to look for, we have a really good admin team. They picked it up right away, and they were all, by the way, new to the tax industry this tax season. So they were brand new. They didn't know anything about taxes really, and they were able to pick it up and did an excellent job with it. They're also listening now, so I'm saying that because it's true. So I guess the training on the forms and the K1s were the same way, because the K1s, K2s, and K3s that were new this year, we had some K1s that were 190 pages long, but most of those pages didn't need to go. So typically, other than law firms where most of the detailed information is needed, most of the investment, venture capital things, those kinds of funds, you can scan it down to a handful of pages that's important, excuse me, and then the reviewer can look it over in person and see if there's anything there that was missed. But as a practical point, they get all the right boxes in the right places. Oh, the other one thing I would tell you is this. We did draft a memo that we sent to Xpitax and told them, these are the basic things that we want you all to do on the returns. It might be put in this PIN code, put in this date, fill in this field. We felt the need, maybe we didn't need to do this, but we told them that when it came to capital gains transactions, don't input the detail, just input a phrase, see attached statement or something along those lines, which they did because we didn't want them spending hours inputting 3,000 transactions. But you give them a little memo of what you want to do and they consistently followed it. So it's like a very basic training memo that you would give a new staff person. So, and then just be careful about what you scan, because it can be very easy when you're scanning a lot of documents to shuffle some files around. But to their credit, the people at Xpitax always seem to note those. I can't tell you how many times I looked at on screen the work papers, and there'd be a document there that was either the child or unrelated somehow. They circled it and said, this is not this client, and they ignored it. And they tell you they did, which was really impressive because it told me they weren't just going through the motions. However, they were trained well, and either they caught it or the reviewer caught it. But either way, we didn't have to worry about that. The system caught those things, even if we weren't going to catch them ahead of time.
Right. Carla, what about you? Thank you so much, Nicholas. That was great feedback. But Carla, over to you again. What are some of the lessons that you learned, knowing that you've kind of moved up over the years, right? You've been using the service for 5 years now. Would love to hear some of the insights of the things that you learned after year 1 and changes that you made years 2 and 3.
Yes, so we started out the first year with 100 returns and then had them do a few more, but certainly getting a good process in place. And each year we've tweaked it to be more efficient, how to scan the documents so that they come back. Things are marked well by Xpitax, and the information that we send to them is accurate. One of the things that they also do, and just so I don't think I've mentioned, but we did 950 individual returns this past tax season, if anybody's counting. But what I would say is you send them information, and it's also a great way for them to find out what's missing in the return. They make some great notes for you when it comes back to say, here's some things that are missing that was on the return in the prior year. And also, here's something that we made the assumption, and please check the diagnostics based on that assumption. So they do well with their communication, and they make good notes. As Nicholas said, in the work papers, they will mark them up and put notes in there for you to see on how they did their work. And calculators, they put calculator tapes in there so that you can see how they've added everything up. If it was like a list of charitable contributions and somebody had written those out, or so we've tweaked our processes from the way it comes in the door, and our admin just logs it in, and if they've signed the disclosure, it goes straight to the people that sort and scan the data, and goes to Xpitax, then it goes straight to the reviewer. So each year we've refined the processes, and I will say, to echo Nicholas, having a great admin staff, and we hired seasonal people to do this and just trained them because they're not around all year long. to do the scanning and some of the sorting. So that was very helpful.
That's great feedback. Thank you so much, Carla and Nick, for those answers. So at this point, I think let's open it up to a few client panel questions, if that's okay. So Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll work through some of the questions that we've received through the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. And Nicholas and Carla, I mean, we could ask you questions all day, but the chat is flooded right now. So we're gonna kind of give the people what they want and switch over to that a little bit. So let me scroll up here, and I'm just gonna kind of work through this. Some of them you've answered a little bit, but we'll just make sure that they all get addressed, and we'll kind of do our best. So Nicholas, I'll start with you, and then Carla will kind of go to you afterwards. So Nicholas, what was the biggest change to your process or the biggest challenge in implementing Xpitax? And was there any issues with like staff getting on board with this model?
No, that was the most interesting thing. And this certainly was our situation, and I'm sure many others had the same situation. Because of the pandemic, we pretty much shifted to virtually 100% remote. Now we're 8 people at our peak here, and as soon as the pandemic hit, everybody pretty much switched to remote and working from home. So we had to scan all the documents that came in anyways to the office, or if they were emailed, we had to put them in a place where our team could prepare the returns. So we were already scanning them. So all we really did was tweak the scanning process a little bit so that it was it had what we wanted and it could be sent to Xpitax. But was there any pushback? No, because everybody was busy doing what they normally do, business returns, and there wasn't this big, crush of extra once a year type of work, individual tax returns. So I don't recall really any pushback. And our goal was to do this was not to reduce the workforce, but was to increase our capacity because we're growing and we want to keep growing. So the goal was, how do we find capacity for the people that are here year round without having to not overwork them, but find a way to deal with the seasonal compression, as Carla said. And it just gives us so much more capacity to do that, we had no pushback.
Great answer. Carla, how about you all in your firm? Any pushback? Was there any big challenge with implementing Xpitax 5 years ago?
I think initially it was who's doing what, what's the best way to get it done, who's going to do it. And once we got a good process in place, that seemed to alleviate some of the stress of who's going to do what and how it's getting done and what will the clients say. And everybody's been pleased. The clients, of course, the clients don't have any communication with the Xpitax folks. It's our staff always communicating, so that's not really an issue. And it's saved returns from sitting in business preparer's office, individual returns sitting there because they're doing business returns, and it provides better client service. The returns get done much quicker, and you have a more satisfied client.
Absolutely. We hear the term champion a lot, right, for people when we implement software. Did you all designate a champion for Xpitax, or kind of was it more of a group effort in your all's firms?
We in our firm, we like to create standards for everyone. It's not just this group is the only people that do this. We like it to, everybody is on board, and when we decided to do it, that's what we did. Yes, there was a champion. I guess part of that was me and a couple other tax managers, and everybody's been really pleased in it. We have buy-in from the beginning, and it's worked great for us.
Awesome. Nicholas, anything to add there on your end?
I don't know if champion would be the right word, because we're a one owner firm, which is me. The champions were the admin people, basically. And like Carla said, the work came in, it got sent to Xpitax the same day in most cases, and it was back the next day. So They didn't sit around, they came in, and as long as our admin people were doing that and doing it well, and they were, the workflow was great. And as I said, most of the returns were reviewed either by myself or by my manager. So we were getting high quality returns back, so we were happy. So there wasn't really a lot of people, there weren't multiple people to get on board. And the people, our admin people, were hired for that purpose, among other reasons. So they knew that going in. But I was the champion in that sense. But like I say, our admin people, nobody pushed back on it. They were all happy to make it work, and they were always, coming up with suggestions. And we're always, like Carlos said, trying to improve the process. And I'm sure we'll have some changes we'll do next year as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of you all are using offshore preparation of the tax returns, correct?
Yes, we are offshore.
Yeah, we're using Xpitax for the personal returns. And the thing is, what I've noticed in the last maybe 1 or 2 years is, as I attend some of the professional conferences, the explosion in the number of vendors who offer offshore services, be it India, Philippines, or wherever. And we're actually exploring some offshore bookkeeping services. We already signed up for one at this point. So the offshore piece, all I can say is you have people who are motivated, who want to do the work and do a great job. And that's what we don't see the people at Xpitax face to face, but we have a dedicated team that works on our account. And the other opportunities we have are looking very promising. And we run into a lot of people who are doing it. So offshore is I think it's here to stay. And I think we've been pretty happy with it so far.
Yeah, very well said. Ray, if you're still out there, we have a question that I think could probably go to you on this, and it's kind of a two-part question. I'm going to combine them together a little bit. So a question came in, the first piece being, can we use Xpitax if we use ProSystem.FX? So really talking about which softwares that we have the capabilities of working with. And then if you could highlight some of the differences between Xpitax and then the onshore service that we have as well.
Yeah, so we certainly can provide offshore and onshore services for ProSystem.FX. So our onshore team works with Access Tax and ProSystem.FX Tax. Our offshore team works with both of those applications, as well as UltraTax, Lacert, GoSystem. Primarily, those are the primary software applications we use offshore. And that's really the big difference between offshore and onshore. Our onshore team, more basic types of returns, 1040s, maybe some 1041s. Versus our offshore team. Our offshore team has been in existence for 20 years. Some of the people who were there 20 years ago are still leading that team. Our supervisors have 5 to 7 years experience. Our managers have 10 to 15 years experience. All of our preparers have anywhere from 1 to 5 years experience, depending on when we hired them. And they're all full-time employees for Xpitax and WK. We don't hire temporary employees for our offshore team. So they're full-time, they're there year-round, which is why we process returns year-round. Nicholas was talking about extension season. We've already had 35 firms sign up for extension season returns in just a short period of time. So that's the primary difference between the two applications. We don't do, between the two services, offshore, onshore.
Awesome, thank you, Ray. Another question that's come in is a little while ago was kind of centered around the 7216 process, and how did you roll it out to your clients, and did you receive any pushback? I know, Nicholas, you touched on this a little bit earlier. It sounds like you put into your engagement letter, you had a little bit of pushback, but if you all could just kind of highlight that again for the masses, that would be great. And we'll start with you, Nicholas. maybe we'll jump to Carla. Carla, how about you all? How did you all handle the 7216, and did you receive any pushback from your clients on that?
When we first started, we sent out a letter with our tax organizer, and then included the disclosure. Just we wanted to be transparent with our clients, and you know, we had some questions, and we just talked through it. And there were very few, but you know, a few people you're always going to have that didn't want to, and we're like, fine, we process plenty in our office as well, and we're happy to do that. And quite frankly, the client probably, I don't even know if they read the engagement letters and the disclosure these days. You know, you feel like you're signing one of those you know, software usage sign. You know, you must agree before you can move forward. But engagement letters seem to be so much longer these days. But we really haven't had the real pushback. Like I said earlier, everything's more global, and things are getting done all over the world. In the background, your clients really don't know whether their return was actually prepared. You know, the data was entered from somebody in India versus somebody here in the U.S. I mean, you could have employees that are working in the Philippines or South Africa or wherever, and that they're your employees, and you're really not even offshoring that. They're just employees. So I think it's a matter of your clients just understanding how the world is working these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicholas, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't answer before. I didn't quite hear you say my name. But as Carla was talking, this goes back to the question of what to know going into it. For us, at least, we didn't always have the email addresses for both parties if it was a joint tax return. And with the DocuSign, or the system we used, it's like DocuSign, we needed to have both emails, as I understand it at least, so that it would go to both parties, because both spouses had to sign it, which led to some interesting discussions, because in some cases one spouse signed it and didn't read it, the other spouse did and started to yell at the other spouse why they didn't read what they signed. But other than that, it was pretty smooth. And as I said, we just sent it out in January. This was our first year doing DocuSign documents, so for us it was new in the sense that people had asked us to do that, and we sent this engagement letter out like that. And as we said, not much pushback at all. And what I found, as I said earlier, for the people who did ask, the most compelling argument that I felt I could make was, I told people we researched the security and we went into some detail about what it is, but I said at the end of the day, I feel so comfortable with this that I send my own personal tax documents there. So, you know, my social security, all my information is being sent to Xpitax. And if I had any concerns about the security, why would I do that? So for me, that was a simple way for me to relate to my clients that I had faith in it. And I don't know that anybody really cared about it, but I thought it sounded like a good argument for the security issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going on to 7216 and talking about the client's interaction with you all, and kind of taking it one step further, everybody wants to talk about money, right? So do you all have any pushback from clients saying, hey, essentially, if you're outsourcing my tax return should be cheaper? Did that conversation come up at all, or just kind of talk about maybe realization rates and just how that helps you all with pricing of tax returns and things of that nature in your internal business?
Carl, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Well, we haven't really been asked that question because a client could argue that there's automation and we have software tools to scan and auto flow, and we do some of that as well. But it comes down to how can we help you better, and we can now use our time to be more advisory to you rather than spending our time doing data entry of your information. So, I mean, we certainly didn't lower our price, and many times it's helped with the realization on those returns because they're very accurate and gives us more time to, like I said, either spend with the client or have an opportunity to work with additional clients.
Yeah, that's great. Nicholas, how about you all?
Same. I don't think anybody ever asked that question. Number one. Number two, as I say, for us, it was just a question of capacity and scalability. Before we used Xpitax, the quality of the return and the documents and the preparation that would get onto a reviewer's desk was varied. Now we get the same, we get all the scanned documents back, a set of work papers that are amazing and all look the same. They've been reviewed twice, and as Carla said, some open points list, this is what's missing. I was even surprised that in some cases they were able to pick up on the mortgage interest, maxims and do work papers on those. So it makes the review time so much easier, the processing time so much shorter, and instead of us tracking hours for a preparer that can vary, it's more like a production-based system where it's 10 pages, it costs this much, it's 100 pages, it costs this much. And in every case, I mean, the returns that we do are all fairly high fee. And I mean, if they cost us $200 for a complicated return, and then the review time is pretty little, as Carla says, the realization is very good. And it allows us to keep our fees where we want them to be. And you don't have to worry about, employees needing increases and the benefits that go along with them. In this case, it was, as I said, I have a hard time finding anything bad about it at this point.
Yeah, so another question that came in, and why you just kind of brought something to my attention. You would say, I guess you could argue, Nicholas, that your review time probably decreased overall because of the preparation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it got to the point where I knew what I was going to see, what I was looking at, probably in part to the fact that the same group of people were preparing the returns. Very, very high degree of confidence in what I was reviewing. And in fact, I'm amazed I can say this. I did not find one error on those returns until a couple of days after the deadline, and it was only because this particular client had 10 IRA withdrawals, all with very similar account numbers, and one was missed, and that was a pretty minimal error. So you say 99% accuracy. I don't know how you track that, but I'll tell you my experience was very similar to that. So however you track it, that number is pretty good. It's pretty accurate.
Yeah. We have an audit that's done after busy season every year, and so that's kind of how we have a third party that does the audits for us, and they provide us the numbers that we go off of. So don't take our word for it, right? Take the auditor's words for it. Carla, how about you? Would you say that your review time was a little bit less, and obviously you mentioned your realization rates were better, so more money per return, right?
That's correct. A lot less, I'll say less time in review because, you're not ticking and tying and you learn that the accuracy is there. And so they're very knowledgeable and pick up on things and see things that, might be hidden. So that's been very helpful. But yes, certainly it creates more efficiency on our end.
Awesome. Now we're kind of getting a little bit more into the nuances of what types of returns did you send? Were the folks and individuals that you worked with, did they have knowledge of specific nuances for states that you all work within? So let's talk about that. So Nicholas, what kind of returns did you guys send to us? And since you're up in Massachusetts and you're probably doing most likely Massachusetts state returns, did you run into issues with any kind of state returns being done, and just the nuances of things and how your state works specifically?
Short answer is no, but I would just say that because this is our first season going through the whole season with it, a lot of the returns that are multi-state are on extension. So probably I'd have to reserve comment on that, but from what I've seen so far, I don't expect it to be any different than what we have seen on the federal side. And yeah, like I said, there's been very little that we've given them to do. In fact, I can't think of anything we've given them to do that they couldn't come back. The returns were, some of them have 10, 15, 20 hedge funds, real estate funds, any kind of a K1 you can imagine, 1099s that are, very large, rental properties. I mean, there's no return that I have found to be too complicated. We have a pretty high range of complicated returns, I think. I mean, certainly, I wouldn't call them very simple. And they're the kind of returns that I might have thought of, gee, is this something that they can handle? But we tried it out last year. We sent all the returns that were on extension and had the late arriving K1s, and they handle them fantastic.
And Carla, how would your experience be?
We do a lot of multi-state returns, and they pick up on that. We're in the state of North Carolina, and some of the state retirees, some of there are specific ones that get exempt from state tax. And I think, as Nicholas said at the beginning, Xpitax has a summary of here's all the assumptions. They send it to you before you ever get started. You have some meetings with them so that everybody's on the same page. And they send here's all these on any return we do. These are all the assumptions we're going to make or standards that we're going to follow. And then if you wanted like charitable contributions, non-cash charitable contributions, and you wanted them to put the fair market value at or the original cost at 4 times the amount of the contribution versus 5 times, you would just let them know at the very beginning, and then going forward they would always do that. So for North Carolina, we explained to them about if you see a 1099-R from the Teachers and State Retirement System and it's got at the bottom vested as of August 1989, then that gets excluded from state income tax. And so they picked up on that. And in the first year, we didn't tell them, and they weren't doing it. And we're like, well, why wouldn't they do it? But that's because they're probably not as familiar with every single state. But if there's specifics about your state and you let them know, they'll do it, and they'll research it and make sure it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, I know we're kind of coming up on the hour, and I mean, the questions are going on for days. So I think one that when I was reading through the chat, one that I really, really liked to kind of see was if you have an individual that's kind of on the fence right now, right? And they're saying, hey, I think I want to get started, I just don't know. What would the advice be that you give to those individuals on this call that are sitting in that bucket right now? So Carla, we'll start with you.
Well, what I would say is give it a try. I think it's extension season right now, and I believe Xpitax has a program that lets you sort of do some trial returns. There might be a minimum number. I'm not quite sure what all that might be, but I can tell you that's what we did because we weren't sure, and we tried it out in the extension season and just to get comfortable and see how it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. Nicholas, how about you? What advice would you give to somebody kind of sitting on the fence right now?
Same thing. We were pretty committed to doing it, and unfortunately, you guys were sold out when I first learned about this. So when end of March, beginning of April rolled around, we contacted you folks and said, look, we don't want to get shut out of the extension season. What can you do? And I believe the minimum number of returns we could sign up for was 50. You folks told me before the meeting today that that's down to 25. I would tell you the cost to do 25 returns is pretty minimal. Give it a shot. You all have extensions. You all have returns that have extensions. You're waiting for final K1s to come in. You have clients who gave you things at the last minute, or clients who still haven't given you things. Get the engagement letters to them, and if they sign it, try it out. Very low cost, and it'll give you a real good working run on how it works. and I'd be surprised if you're disappointed. It's a great, inexpensive way to start. Start when you're not busy this time of year, and try it out. Taking it for a test drive is what it really comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, again, I want to thank you all so much for your time answering these questions. And again, we have, I mean, I'm looking at 50 more questions in the chat. We just frankly don't have time to get to all of them. I will say this, we will sell out this year, everybody. We have 100,000 returns that we can do this year, and we will sell out. So do not wait, heed their advice, make sure you save your spot. Marie, with that, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Well, I just want to thank you both, Nicholas and Carla, again for your time this afternoon. This has been immensely helpful, I'm sure, for many of the clients here that have had these questions, and I'm sure it helps to put them at ease with what to expect from the process and how to manage those conversations with their clients. As Drew said, if you do have additional questions, please reach out to your sales executive, and we will be happy to help respond to any of those questions that weren't answered on today's panel. And again, as Drew said, we did sell out last year. We sold out early last year. So if you are considering outsourcing, definitely get in touch with us as quickly as possible, and we'll be happy to support you with any additional questions that you have. So again, thank you to Carla and Nick, and thank you all for your time this afternoon. And with that, Alyssa, I will hand it over to you to wrap us up.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just launch one quick poll, if you would not mind answering it. If you'd like to be contacted, if you'd like to learn more about Xpitax, please let us know so that we can have one of our representatives reach out to you right away. And so thank you to everyone that joined us today, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our internal team. And I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful weekend.